Today, we're also hearing from a grieving mother after learning her son's death was ruled a homicide while he was in the Harris County Jail. We broke this story earlier as we continue to try and get answers from law enforcement about what happened. It's one of many inmate deaths 13 Investigates has been tracking. ABC 13's Nick Notario live outside the jail. And Nick, now that we know it was a homicide, any new details about exactly what happened?
All we're hearing from investigators is that this is under investigation, and that's not sitting well with this family who worry about the other inmates here at the jail, especially because the number of inmate deaths continues to rise.
I don't know what happened.
Clutching her son's photo in hand, Jocelyn Lee held back tears. She spoke about the news she had waited 284 days to receive.
It has totally broken our family for miles around this country.
In March, Evan Lee died while he was in custody at the Harris County Jail. Since then, Lee says she's learned little about his death. That changed late last week when a medical examiner ruled his death a homicide.
It really tore me mentally, first of all, just to know that someone else is involved.
The sheriff's office says Lee was booked in a jail 4 months before he died. In March, they say he was involved in a fight. A week later, he complained of pain similar to food poisoning. 4 days later, he was dead. Attorney Randall Callanan is working with the family, but no legal action has been taken.
Right now, we're waiting for the autopsy report and also the Texas Rangers report, which has been promised several times.
Family members say they spoke today to bring attention to this growing issue at the jail. 13 Investigates found so far this year 25 people have died at the jail. Last year, it was 20. 2 years ago, it was 15. The 2022 death total is the highest in at least a decade. Staggering figure that hits hard for family members who want changes to be made.
It was anger that came to me, but I will not let anger take over. I will continue to get justice and get answers.
The sheriff's office pointed us to the Texas DPS to answer some more of our questions. We have reached out to them, but so far we have not heard back. The Texas Rangers are currently conducting the investigation right now. Now, coming up on Eyewitness News at 6:30, the family also talked about what changes they like to see happen, so that way 2023, the rising death total here at the jail, doesn't climb again. Live in downtown, Nick Notario, ABC 13 Eyewitness News.
Nick, thank you for the update there. Our 13 Investigates team has been tracking data related to booking inmates as well. The Harris County Jail remains in violation of state standards. 14% of people arrested wait 48 hours or more to be booked into the jail. The standard is less than 48 hours, so why should you care? That means there's a delay in an already backlogged court system, and when it comes to inmate deaths, just last August, an inmate died while suffering from a medical emergency in the intake area.
Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. Today's guest, Julian Hemmings, a mentee of the Gilchrist Experience, and Nan, he's home today, here in New York.
Yep.
Going to law school out in Michigan. You've seen him on Zoom several times. He brought this item to us, on short notice, so we're putting it together, the old hands, and welcome home to Leroy. Leroy Baylor hasn't been here since the beginning of COVID.
Thank you. Thank you.
And this is truly my brother. We're 2 days apart in birthdays. Yeah. And last time I saw him, he was
80.
80. 80.
Amazing.
Now, we're both 82. In April, we both turned 82. And of course, Graham Weatherspoon, who shares a birthday just recently. What was it? May what?
30th.
30th. May 30th.
Monday.
He turned 74.
Tuesday.
So he's the younger person. The youngsters over here.
Yeah, you get older,
Julian,
but you're not supposed to get old. You know.
So the old crew is back, and we're here with some hot news. Now I think we have a lawyer on the Zoom.
Yeah, Randall Callanan.
Julian, introduce the lawyer in this case.
Yeah, so Attorney Randall Callanan is an attorney in Houston, Texas. He's a civil rights lawyer. He's taking a number of these cases that are happening where there are a ton of young people, ton of people in general being attacked. They're either brain dead or they're physically dead, and their civil rights are just constantly being violated in Harris County Jail. Randall Callanan was extremely kind in offering his time and ensuring that we had an opportunity to hear a legal perspective of what's going on. And you know, no one knows the facts at this time better than Randall and other than people who committed these crimes against these people. So really, Randall, thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah.
So, Randall, explain to me what happened. I know nothing
In this
about the
particular
case.
case, oh, by the way, the individual that you showed actually now is being represented by Benjamin Crump.
Ah, okay.
I do, however, have 3 cases. One where a youngster, Fred Harris, a special needs student, African American, who was 19 years old, was murdered in the Harris County Jail. And then I have the case of Adiel Garcia, who was in a coma after being severely beaten by guards from the Harris County Jail, a young Hispanic man. And then also I have the case of Vincent Young, an African American young man, about 40 with the family, who died in the Harris County Jail. So those are the 3 cases I have pending right now. Now, regarding the problems at the Harris County Jail, some of the big problems have to do with overcrowding and lack of staff. As a matter of fact, it got so bad that the employees of the jail have sued in federal court because they're not getting the funding and they're not getting the staffing that's required of the jail so that the people can be properly watched and cared for. And so the number of deaths in 2022 was actually a record, and not by just barely a record. It was like a 30 or 40% increase over the previous year that had the second highest number of deaths. And so what we have is problems with bad medical care. We have guards using excessive force. As a matter of fact, one individual was indicted. A guard was indicted just recently for murder in a case, or a young African-American man was murdered in the Harris County Jail. And that's a big problem. And also, since they don't have the staff and it's overcrowded, there becomes a lot of fights and assaults. And the people aren't being protected from, you know, the larger, very serious criminals are injuring some of the, the less fortunate. So we have big problems in the Harris County Jail, and it's led to many deaths and many injuries.
Sounds like Rikers Island. Now, we here in New York are familiar with all this stuff. What say ye?
Well,
Graham?
it's very troubling in that none of these men have been convicted of a crime. It's a jail, it's not a prison. They're waiting to have a trial or some type of hearing, and they're not even getting to the hearing or the trial. Even more disturbing is the fact that you have officers brutalizing. I read an article, there's a gentleman in a coma, I don't remember his name, but they said that the correction officer slammed his head into the wall, into the door, and then dropped this guy on his head. There were some other officers who were fired following an incident where another inmate died, but no charges were ever filed against those officers. So they were free to just go about their lives. Texas is a funny state for more reasons than we can imagine, but
All the reasons.
just hearing about these deaths, no one should be going to their death after having been arrested at all. And
what about this Roland we showed you, whereas they just decided after how many days, 284 days, that it was a homicide? And what was the reason for his death before that? Do you know what it was?
They really didn't say. It was the medical examiner who determined that in the case of Evan Lee, it was a homicide. However, they have not released the autopsy report in that situation, and of course, that's the case that now is in the hands of Benjamin Crump.
Okay.
But in regards to Mr. Adiel Garcia,
Yeah.
that's one of my clients who he was in a coma for many days due to a guard, and he was not charged with any crime as a result of that injury, because usually, of course, if an inmate attacks a guard, he is charged with an assault charge. But Mr. Garcia was not charged with any assault case, which, you know, that's because he didn't assault anybody. They assaulted him. And there's videos there, so I can only suspect that they didn't bother charging him with any crime, because when the video come out, it would show that he was the one assaulted. So that case is currently pending. I do want to mention a couple other big problems with the Harris County Jail, and that is, in Texas, the average stay of an individual in the jail is 60 days. In Harris County, the largest jail in Texas and third largest in the United States, is 200 days.
Wow.
So now we're not talking 10% more or 5% more. We're talking 266% longer on average with the biggest jail. And so it lays at the feet of the sheriff and also what's known as the Commissioner's Court here in Houston, and excuse me, in Harris County. That's the county we're in, who runs the jail. It's the Commissioner's Court, the Harris County Commissioner's Court, that appropriates money. And they have not appropriated the enough money and enough staff in order to keep the people safe. Furthermore, I just want to point out one of the differences in New York law and in Texas law in regards to civil rights. Because what we're talking about here is civil rights cases where the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution says there shall not be any unreasonable searches and seizures. And so when you get some guards beating someone up, that's considered an unreasonable seizure under the Fourth Amendment. And so the law in New York, for example, they have certain state laws which help out the victims of police abuses to get compensation. Those are state laws. Here in Texas, the state has not passed any state laws to help with civil rights. So I have to depend upon, and my clients have to depend upon, only the federal law. 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, which came out of the 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act, which it was not interpreted to allow for people to get compensation for injuries until like the 60s or 70s. But it's a very difficult law because the government is not directly liable, and you also have to show purposeful behavior. So gross negligence or even negligence, that's nothing. You cannot get any compensation for that.
Tell me, where does racism fit in here? Harris County is the largest black county in Texas?
Well, they would have the largest African-American county in the most population of any county in Texas. Harris County is huge. It's got it's nothing like New York, but it's got 4.8 million people in it. And their jail is the third largest in the United States.
Oh, really?
After Chicago and I believe Los Angeles.
Wow. Okay.
So what we have is a lot there, and the population of African Americans in Harris County, I believe it's around 20%. So you're talking almost a million African Americans in the county, and then it's mostly Hispanic. It's approaching like 50% Hispanic, so you have that minority as well. So, and in my practice as civil rights, of course, what I've noticed is that African Americans are not treated as well as Caucasians. And so they're the ones that are most commonly calling me, and the most common calls I get is from African Americans. And I also take cases of like business discrimination against African Americans. So a lot of people call me about that as well. It's called 42 USC Section 1981, and that was a law that came out of the civil rights movement of the 60s, discrimination in accommodations.
So since Attorney Crump's involved with the Evans case, he can't talk about that?
Can you comment on the Evans case at all?
Well, I mean, I did represent the client for a while. I mean, in that case, as far as I know, what I've seen on television is that they still haven't given up the autopsy report, which was a problem because without the autopsy report, you don't know, exactly what happened. And so that's another problem, is that Texas's open records laws are very, very weak, and they have big exceptions. One of the exceptions is called the litigation exception, so it's very difficult to get government documents. And so in that particular case, the government has not been very forthcoming with the records in order so that the case can move forward. And there is a 2-year statute of limitations on civil rights causes of action, so you do have to file the lawsuit within 2 years of the injury.
So I just want to say this, Randall, in case the Zoom ends, just re-sign in so we can continue the conversation. One, and my second thing, I have a question for you. What was the correctional officer's response or reason for his treatment towards Gonzalez Garcia?
Well, once again, that's all the secrecy of these cases. They haven't come forward and said anything. Well, what they said was he wasn't cooperating or he did something. However, if he did anything, he would have been charged with a crime. As a matter of fact, there is a rule which I believe to be unconstitutional, which I have attacked in several of my civil rights cases against the Harris County Jail, is that if an officer charges an individual who he beat up, if the officer then charges that individual with a crime, the policy is with the Internal Affairs Department is hands off. We don't even investigate. So somebody could be severely injured, and all the officer has to do is, wait a second, he committed a crime against me, and then that stops the Internal Affairs investigation. And in one of the Federal Circuit courts, they've decided that rule is unconstitutional because it encourages false arrests and also stops the investigation of any excessive force case. So that's another, I mean, the hurdles you have to go through here in Texas is, there are so many hurdles that it's like, you can vote, but first you got to run a marathon. Then you got to climb Mount Everest. Then you got to, do this and that. So what they're doing is they're, putting all these hurdles in the way of a civil rights, litigant.
For a follow-up question, for the young men or the men who are injured by correctional officers, how often is it that the officers do not give a response? And then on top of that, how often is it that these young men who they claim attacked them were not charged with a crime?
Well, that does happen on occasion. A lot of times there are cover-up crimes, though, because I've had a lot of people who have come to me and they were initially charged with a crime, and in the end, the case is dismissed against the individual. So, and they're not easy on crime here in Texas. So that indicates that they never did the crime. I really don't know the number, but that happens very often. And of course, with this, what I believe to be an unconstitutional policy, whereby you can prevent the IAD investigation into a guard's behavior, just if the guard will just, claim a crime has occurred, such as assault on a public servant, that adds to it. And I've seen that in several of my cases. One where an Hispanic man was shot in the back and several times by an officer. And another case where a client was injured by a guard attacking him. They file these charges, and that prevents the IAD from investigation from moving forward. And I got that straight from the horse's mouth, and the horse's mouth is the sheriff of Harris County, Ed Gonzalez.
Wow.
So, all right, let's take a break from this and run item 1. And we'll go back to the beginning. On the Gilchrist experience.
So you want me to re-sign in, or?
Yeah, re-sign in.
Okay, I'll get out of this one and I'll re-sign in now.
Okay.
Good evening to you. I'm Tom Ziska. We're glad to have you with us. We begin with the Houston mother who is still grieving over the loss of her son who died while in Harris County Jail custody a year ago. She was joined today by lawmakers from Houston and in Washington who introduced legislation that could help reform the facility. Fox 26's Sherman DeSalle is live with details tonight. Sherman.
Yeah, good evening, Tom. There's still so many questions surrounding Evan Lee's death while in custody, including why he was arrested and sent there in the first place. Meanwhile, his mother says she will continue to fight for justice and to see some change in this jail. It's a facility that's still getting deaths reported there this year.
We need a change. I'm going to continue to go in every corner, every direction.
A year after his passing, Jocelette Griffin says she's still trying to figure out what happened to her son, Evan Lee, who died while in Harris County Jail custody. She says on December 22nd of 2021, Evan was arrested in the Arcola area while walking home from a neighborhood store and sent to jail. Deputies say he had a warrant for his arrest, a felony charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, a charge the family still questions. Evan's mother says she received a call from Ben Taub on March 18th, 2022, that her son needed emergency surgery. Lee died just days later.
From head trauma. There was blood trapped between his brain and his skull.
But the initial sheriff's office report given to Fox 26 indicated he was hospitalized for possible food poisoning symptoms. Officials told the family this past December his death has been ruled as a homicide by the Texas Rangers. They hope to hear more from the DA's office soon. Lee is one of 28 deaths reported at the jail for 2022. 4 deaths have already been reported this year. After a failed state inspection, a new plan to tackle issues at the jail was approved by county commissioners, which includes body-worn cameras for all staff, a new detention captain, and a family coordinator for inmates. Legislators are taking it a step further. Representative Ron Reynolds announces House Bill 3434, a measure specifically for Harris County, calling for the state to conduct thorough studies and investigations into each death reported at the facility.
Ms. Griffin, I promise you, as chair of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, that is one of my top legislative priorities, is to get that bill not just heard, but get that bill passed.
It's another piece of artillery for Evan's mother, who says she won't stop fighting until things truly change.
This is 2023, and we should not be dealing with the same thing we dealt with in the 1800s.
State Representative Reynolds says that this bill is going to go before a committee soon. He hopes to get some bipartisan support on it. Meanwhile, U.S. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee says that she's been having conversations with the Department of Justice, hoping that they could provide some assistance and even a thorough civil rights investigation into what's been happening at that facility. Reporting from Houston, Sherman DeSalle, Fox 26 News.
We watched. I have my videos mixed up. But one thing I like to cover about Texas is that we've got all sorts of problems in Texas as far as black people are concerned. Graham and I were talking about the Attorney General was just impeached. And we have problems with the governor with loose gun laws.
Right.
And the most mass shootings are in Texas. Right?
And there are more guns in Texas than any other state in the country.
Yeah.
My daughter-in-law was conducting an investigation for the department she worked with. She's a police officer. Well, she's moved to another department, another agency, but she was doing the investigation of a candidate. She had his paperwork, and then she found that he had a rap sheet for robbery and another crime. And he was working for another police department in Texas. In Texas, an individual may get a license to serve anywhere in the state as a police officer. So
we're talking about the Wild Wild West.
She called the chief at the other department, spoke to him over the phone, and she said, well, I'd like to come and meet with you regarding the candidate who wants to work with us. And she drove to that location, and she asked the chief, who conducted the background investigation? He said, well, I did the background investigation. So she said, interesting. Did you not see his rap sheet before you hired him? And he was shocked. The guy had a felony arrest.
How long ago was this?
About 5 years ago.
Oh, 5 years, okay.
And she told him, we will not be hiring this gentleman under any circumstances.
Okay.
So,
Well, it's gotten worse since then.
well, you know, the old boys network is the old boys
Yeah.
network. And some people have called for a national registry with regard to police officers and correction officers, because they will leave one jurisdiction and go to another and seek employment. And this is a problem because people get victimized.
Yeah.
And I remember years ago here in New York, there was a guy in the police academy. They had some FBI agents come in to teach a class. And they intentionally called this guy up to play the role, do a little role play. And it's, all right, leave your gun belt, you know, and we're gonna do blah, blah, blah. So he takes off his gun belt and he goes up to the front of the room, and they handcuffed him and took him out. He was wanted for bank robbery. And he was in the police academy. And sometimes information doesn't come back, and in many cases, it's about who you know.
That's right.
I saw an officer real quick. I came into command one day, I see an officer, I said, who's that woman over there? Oh, she's a new recruit just out of the academy. I said, no, 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 no. That's a junkie. Oh, come on, Spoon, why are you calling her a junkie? I said, I know a junkie when I see a junkie. The next day, she's knocking on my office door. Detective, I need to talk to you. What's up? I got robbed. You got robbed? Yeah, I got robbed in Staten Island. Come in, sit down. What happened? She's telling me the story how she got robbed on Staten Island Rapid Transit. I asked her for a description. She says, they got my gun. They got your gun. She gives me a description of two black guys, blah, blah, blah. I said,
Staten Island.
on Staten Island. I said, do you have your shield? Do you have your ID card? She says, yeah. I said, let me see it. Okay, and I said, roll up your sleeves. She said, what? I said, roll up your sleeves. And she rolled them up. And she had more tracks on her arms than a subway map. And I said, I don't know how you got in here and who you know, but you're done. I said, but we're gonna get that gun. Where is the gun? Because nobody robbed you, because black people don't ride the Staten Island Rapid Transit System. It doesn't go to a black neighborhood, and two guys are not gonna rob a white woman and wait for the train to carry them back to the ferry terminal. That's not happening. And she wound up, she sold her gun.
Staten Island is the Mississippi of New York.
That's right. So she sold the gun to buy heroin for her and her boyfriend.
Oh my God.
So there are inherent problems because police officers come from the general population. They're not coming from another planet. They're coming from the general population.
Well, let's talk more about Texas and the other problems that we're having in Texas with the gun laws. The governor's name?
Abbott.
Abbott, yeah.
Abbott.
Hey, Abbott. Yeah.
I mean, just the mass shootings alone, what he's done about the Dallas one, the Uvalde. Uvalde is a...
Well, there were 470 some odd law enforcement officers on that scene. City, You had municipal, you had state, and you had federal.
Mm-hmm.
And all of them were afraid to make a move. That says a lot.
About what
It's
an
not just
AR
about the officers from Uvalde, but the state, the Texas Rangers, and the federal agents that responded to that scene. All of them
Okay.
failed the children in that scenario. Every last one of them.
Took them an hour and a half to do anything.
That was nonfeasance.
But they were fearful of the power of the AR-15. Now, let's get to it.
They
were
had
afraid-
AR-15s.
I know. but
There
that-
was video of the Uvalde police officers standing and telling the parents to stay back,
But they know
holding AR-15s.
But they know that what getting hit with that would mean to them. They're familiar with how the power of the AR.
If you're afraid to
15.
do the job, then you need, you know, everybody
So
wants to.
What should happen to Texas in reality is I don't know what to say about it. Everything is wrong with. We were talking. I don't know how black people survive. I know a lot of good people there. All right.
Is Calaman still with us?
He's back.
Calaman, Attorney Calaman.
All right. How are you?
There he is.
Oh, I'm great.
Any
I was just
comments
listening
on
to you.
what we were talking about? Did you hear any of what we were talking about?
Oh yeah, no, I heard about what you were talking about, and your first comments reminded me of the Central Park 5 about the Staten Island incident. But regarding the shootings in Texas, yes, they recently relaxed the laws even more, so anybody can carry a gun. An 18-year-old can buy an AR-15, in minutes, and anybody can carry a gun now. And so you got a lot of shootings. You have road rage incidences just proliferating in Houston. Almost every day somebody gets shot in a road rage because everybody has these guns. And regarding the Uvalde shooting where 21 people died, they took 71 minutes before anybody, entered. And that was one teenager with a gun. You've seen some of these examples that you've seen on television recently where the officers, get to the people in 5 minutes and, stop the threat. Here it was 71 minutes and people bleed out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of these kids were probably wounded, bleeding, and they could have been saved. And maybe some of them, were shot within that, in a later time frame.
yeah.
So what you have here is a complete breakdown and cowardice. Many of the people say they were cowardly.
Right.
Some of them had body armors. They had AR-15s,
Yeah.
and there was only one teenager. Now he had a powerful weapon, but so did all those in those other cases where the officers stopped the threat within minutes. Those people have their guns and AR-15s and so forth. So that the Uvalde problem was a very big problem. And then even closer to home, about 5 years ago, was the Santa Fe high school shooting, where 10 individuals were shot and killed by a teenager with an automatic weapon, or not automatic, but an AR-15 style rifle. So the proliferation of guns is just incredible. Now, I did have an interesting case I can just tell you a little bit about because I haven't taken the case yet, but on YouTube, they show people like in Texas, like Caucasian people with rifles on them, walking down the street, AR-15, going into McDonald's with AR-15s on them, and nothing happens to them. But I had a case where an African American had a gun on him, and he was just had it strapped on him. He wasn't holding it in front of him or anything. And the police came up and they stopped him and they, held him there for like half an hour. And they eventually, and they gave him a ticket for disturbing the peace, which was later dismissed. But he wasn't doing anything. And there was nobody on the street where he was walking, and he was just walking. So there's a disparate treatment there in that particular matter regarding how an African American person with a gun was treated versus a Caucasian individual. So that is an interesting case, and the law is not the greatest, but I was thinking about taking it as a violation of equal protection of the laws, as well as a Fourth Amendment unreasonable seizure of the individual.
So how difficult?
Here in Texas, they're fighting tooth and nail all of these gun law, anything that restricts a gun or any common sense things like the mental health tagging, where you can tag, red flag laws they call them.
Yeah.
And I thought I heard on the news that somewhere, I think it was either Minnesota or was it New York, where they passed a red flag law. I think it was Minnesota. But they don't have that here in Texas. So this gun culture is just getting way out of hand, and mass shootings, road rage incidences on the freeways where people are shooting. It's like we're going back to the old West here.
Tell me one thing. How difficult would it be for me to walk in and buy a gun in Texas? I'm an ex-Marine.
You could buy a AR-15. As soon as you get down here, go to some place and buy it.
Could I get one?
Yep. You certainly can. If you're 18 years old and you're hallucinating because you're psychotic, you can get one too.
So it doesn't matter what color you are? They don't restrict black people buying guns?
No, what I was saying was they don't restrict, to my knowledge, I've not had an instance of that. What I was saying was, this is like an open carry state. So I could go out my door here on the street with AR-15, with a big knife, several guns on me. I could walk up and down the street, and that's totally legal. And what I was saying was a young African-American man came to me and said, hey, here's a video. Look at this video where I was doing the same thing, where I was carrying a gun, not pointing it, not brandishing it like they're holding onto it, just strapped on him. And the police stopped him, hold him for half an hour, give him a ticket for disturbing the peace.
Even though it's an open carry state.
Right.
No, I was just questioning the
It's
fact
open carry state, right.
how easy it is to buy a gun. I mean, if you're white. I mean, it's got to be much harder than if you're black, I would think.
No.
Don't try to buy a pack of cigarettes. But if you can buy a gun.
So
I think it's 21 to buy a pack of cigarettes here, but you can buy an AR-15 at 18 years old, and they're not gonna check to see if you're
attorney, with Harris County Jail being as violent as it is, and the sheriff knowing it, and it being posted all over Fox in Houston, why is it so hard for an investigation to occur within that jail?
Oh, an investigation into what was that?
Why is it so difficult for an investigation to occur as to the abuses and practices in Harris County Jail? Can you hear me?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
The feds could certainly come in. Now there is a state group called the Texas Commission on Jail Standards, and they have done some reporting, and they have been coming out and saying they've been coming out with the problems, this Texas Jail Commission. And also I'd like to point out that when there is a death in a jail, the Texas Rangers always investigate it. Now that came out of the Sandra Bland Act. You remember Sandra Bland?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Well, the Sandra Bland Act, one of the aspects of it was any in a jail death, the Texas Rangers have to investigate. And because the Texas Rangers are a state organization and the jails are county, most of the time what I've discovered is that they're pretty good. They're pretty good at and they're not trying to cover stuff up. I have made whole cases, and one case is based upon that report by the Texas Rangers.
Now, Congresswoman Jackson Lee has asked for the FBI. I think they started an investigation about a year ago, but there are no results of that investigation as yet. Is that so?
Sheila Jackson Lee, what did she ask for again?
An investigation by the FBI. I understood they started an investigation.
To my knowledge, has not occurred. I wish it would occur, an investigation by the FBI. I've asked the FBI to investigate several of my cases, They have not really. Some of them have, listened to me, but they have not really come out with an investigation into any case. They're more they seem to be hands off. But Sheila Jackson Lee is running for the mayor of the city of Houston,
Oh.
and I just hope that when she becomes mayor, that there are things that she can do to help the system. One of the big problems of why the Harris County Jail is overcrowded is because there's a backlog of cases, and some of the major reasons why you have a backlog of cases is that the police agencies don't get the evidence to the district attorney's office in a timely manner, and that's the video evidence, the 911 calls, and the disciplinary record of the officers involved. They are very slow in doing that, so the people sit there in jail, causing overcrowding of the jail. And if you remember at the beginning of our conversation, I had told you that the average stay in a jail in Texas is 60 days, but in the Harris County Jail, it's 200 days. And so that causes overcrowding. As a matter of fact, they're so overcrowded, they're sending about 1,000 inmates over to neighboring Louisiana.
What?
To sit in the jail over there.
What?
And that jail that they're sitting in, one of my clients has stated that's a horrible jail where there's like fights every single day in that particular jail. So
does the governor have
mass
anything to do with
overcrowding.
this? Does the governor have anything to do with this?
The governor, I mean, the governor could step in and do an investigation. I mean, he has the Attorney General's office at his beck and call. He's the top guy in the state government, which includes the Texas Rangers. He could, come in and do some things. I believe he has spoken out, but he has not really done anything substantive that I can see.
What do you think about the impeachment of the Attorney General?
Oh, the Attorney General, the one who they just impeached?
Yeah, tell us about him.
Well, he's impeached, and apparently when you're impeached, that now, of course, just to be clear, impeachment sounds really bad, but that's basically bringing the charges. He hasn't been kicked out yet, but once you're impeached, according to the rules, you cannot act as the Attorney General, and so the governor is supposed to appoint an acting Attorney General. He has not done so yet, but Attorney General Paxton really did very little to assist in these matters.
I wanted to ask you if you could talk quickly about the facts of the case for the 19-year-old special needs young man that for the case that you're taking on. If you could talk about what happened to him while he was in Harris County Jail.
Yeah, well, let me tell you the story because it's very compelling. Fred Harris was a special needs African American youngster. He weighed 98 pounds, and he was like barely 5 foot tall, very thin. And he went and in high school, people just loved him though. As a matter of fact, they made him one of these royalty, like winter royalty, because he had such a cheery outlook on life. Now, once he did graduate from high school, but he suffered from he was like in the 1%, the bottom 1% of intellectual ability and IQ and so forth. He had an IQ of 62. And so he found himself in the Harris County Jail after he graduated. And the reason for that was they say he brandished a knife, but we think we could have defeated that. But however, what happened to them, he ended up in a jail cell by himself with one of the most violent people in the whole jail. And they're never supposed to, and they never should have been together. And that guy murdered him. And that's all. And that could also be related to wrongful classification. And there's just and not the ability for him to be watched. So that's a horrible case. Because this kid was never convicted of anything, and I think in the end he never would have been convicted of this alleged crime because he never injured anybody. They just said he showed a knife. And once again, he was a special needs. He was 60. He was 100 and he was 90 8 pounds, and the person who killed him was 240 pounds. And at first they said that he got into a fight, but when you see the record, there was no fight. It was just an attack and a killing. And the Harris County Jail tried to say, oh, this was like a fight.
They
It wasn't a
have
fight, it was
cameras.
an attack.
I'm sorry. They have cameras. I read somewhere today that there are over 1,000 cameras in that facility.
Yes, I have the video of it. It's under protective order, so I cannot release it, so I cannot release the video of the incident. It's horrific. It's horrific, though. You would not want to see it. I mean, it reminds me of Emmett Till. You know, when Emmett Till, the mother of Emmett Till, you know, wanted the world to see the condition of Emmett Till.
Yes.
And it, you know, it's horrible.
Wow.
Attorney Calaman, the exposure on the Gilchrist experience, I would count as national. What other national exposure has Harris County received, or your cases have received?
Well, we've received a lot of national, press, and some of these cases, like Fred Harris, have been in the New York Times and throughout the United States. I believe that there's been some national coverage on the news regarding the deaths at the Harris County Jail, and the overcrowding and the lack of staff and the lack of discipline of the officers and the brutality, and it's awful.
Wow.
How long has Benjamin Crump been involved with the Evans case?
I believe it's been several months now.
Oh.
A long time?
Several months. I don't know the exact time.
Since
Probably
January.
about 4 or 5 months.
January thing. Wow.
All right.
So
But once again, I no longer have the case, so I really, I'll leave that to Benjamin Crump to, talk about that case.
So what can people do? 'Cause I think people are going to see this and get really angry. What can the public do after seeing this to fight against the corruption that's happening in Harris County Jail?
Well, they can always contact the people in charge, and the people in charge are the Harris County commissioners, the Harris County judge. The top person, the political person in the county is called a judge, even though they're not really, because they're the judge of the commissioner's court. They're not. It's not like a regular civil judge or a criminal judge, but that's what they call them, the judge. And the commissioners are the ones in charge who hand out the money and can say, here's money for staffing. So it's the commissioners who are the major players who need to, step up and change things. And then after that, it's Sheriff Gonzalez of the Harris County Jail regarding discipline and so forth. I mean, he needs to discipline his officers and have better discipline. And also, it's Mayor Turner of the city of Houston, because of all this backlog of information, such as the videos and the 911 calls and the disciplinary records that aren't reaching the system, and that people are sitting in jail, and that contributes to the 200-day average of a person in the Harris County Jail versus the 60-day average in other jails.
In terms, Attorney Calaman, in terms of the cases that you have seen or heard, what has been revealed of membership in the police department of militia-type individuals?
What was that again?
The militias. We're familiar with the militias.
The militias?
Yes, and what, in terms of your cases, not your cases, but all cases that you've heard, what has been revealed that would indicate that militia members are indeed on the staff of these jails or the police department?
Klansmen.
Okay. Yeah. I have, I have heard of. I know that a lot of these people are, probably in those groups, Proud Boys, type groups, and so forth. And so there needs to be, of course, discipline that when somebody is attacked in the jail, they needs to be thoroughly looked at, and you need to get rid of all those officers who are engaging in excessive force. And like I say, based upon, my experience here in my almost 30 years of civil rights, although Hispanic people and white people do have their rights violated, on the average, it's more so African Americans.
How about the gerrymandering laws that have been passed in Texas? Is that a problem
it's
in
horrible.
Harris County?
It's horrible. The gerrymandering is just awful in Texas, and that creates a disparate number of Anglo and Caucasian people who are elected, and you have less minorities, elected because of the gerrymandering.
Right. So we've got all the problems of the nation concentrated in Texas 100-fold. Would you say?
Oh yeah, Texas. If you look at the entirety of it, it's very backward, and going backward with such as you see on the news about Florida. It's like Florida and Texas are competing and going backwards in time to a time of more discrimination and more white supremacy and so forth. And we see that the Republican Party is trying to get I sometimes like to call them the coalition of hate, where they say we'll hate these people and these people, so let's get all the people who have people that they hate and put them together, and we'll call that the Republican Party.
Well, we see that Crump is getting involved with this addition, so we're going to have a lot of national attention to this whole problem of gerrymandering.
Yes, Benjamin Crump gets a lot of
gun
national
laws.
attention, and I did see him on the news here locally, and I hope that he does bring more national attention to this issue, because people are dying and being severely injured in the Harris County Jail.
Okay. What do you think of some of the solutions from your
The
perspective?
solutions are better laws. One of the problems with is the poor laws. The state of Texas needs to pass laws, for example, which allow for compensation of people who are injured by officers. Because the compensation is very hard to get and there's no laws to help, you get very few lawyers who are willing to take on cases because there's no compensation at the end of the case. Even if you show that somebody violated civil rights, you may get no money, because this is a debtor-friendly state, and there's no law that says if you're employed by a police agency that the government has to pay for the injuries. And as a matter of fact, Texas has such debtor-friendly laws that you can't get a person's, if you have a big judgment against someone, you can't get their house, you can't get their car, you can't get their retirement, you can't garnish their wages. So it's very hard for people to be compensated for their injuries. And so that's keeps out most of the lawyers. Just to give you an example, Philadelphia and Houston have police agencies which are about the same size. They're about the same size. Philadelphia, Houston. However, the claims paid out by Philadelphia is at least 10 times as much. The reason being is Pennsylvania has passed laws so that if a person is injured, they can get paid. So what you have here is just a series of hurdles and different laws in effect. Now, one of the things with the city of Houston, and I hope if Sheila Jackson Lee gets elected as the mayor, I hope she will look into increasing the amount of money that the city of Houston will indemnify their officers for, because it's only $100,000, and that's the same as has been since the 80s when this law came out. And if you were to go back to it's basically been whittled down to like 1/3 of its original value, and that doesn't take care of very many people, because there are a lot of lawyers who will take cases and to help with these situations, but there's no way for them to be compensated, and so there's very few lawyers who will put up all the effort to do all this with little compensation.
So you're speaking, well, we only have a minute left. But thank you for your information. I mean, you made us aware of what's happening throughout the country, and really, but it's it's especially attention to Texas because of all their other flaws, which is
Yes.
the governor.
Well, I want to
the governor.
thank you all for having me on the show, and I hope the people of, I guess it's Harlem and Manhattan and all of New York, can see this, and I hope they'll write the Commissioner's Court of Harris County and the sheriff and the mayor of Houston and tell them they need to, fix these things.
Yes.
3 minutes.
Okay.
Oh,
So, thank you. All right, gentlemen.
You had a
Important
question?
story. Very,
Julie?
very important. Julian bringing this information to us is another eye opener.
Hmm.
You know,
So
for
what do we do to change it?
You know, the burden that it puts upon victims is unbelievable, and on the attorneys who would seek to help them. You know, taking a case on contingency means
Yeah.
that the attorney would be paid at the end, and they have to eat too. You know, so the entire structure in that state is built to prevent people from obtaining any justice when egregiously having been violated by the very system that's supposed to protect them.
so true. Attorneys like Attorney Callahan are doing the right work, and we know that Harris County is just terrified of the kind of payout that will occur when this information goes out to light. So, let's make sure that this story goes out there. Let's keep fighting, and let's make sure these families are. I mean, you'll never be able to replace it, but that something happens, and that there's some kind of punitive damages for the way they've been treating these people.
Again, thank you for coming. And it.
All right, well, thank you so much, and y'all have a good evening now.
Attorney,
Well,
Thank you.
I want
Thank
to,
you.
the next time we speak, I want to come up with some firm solutions to all this, because this is a nationwide problem. And how we vote the bad guys out and the good guys in.
That's
All right?
correct.
So we need your direction to help the lawyers, anyway, to get compensated for their efforts. I'm sure that you're the main one. You seem to be making the most effort.
Yeah,
hopefully we have
unfortunately, I wish there
another-
were more civil rights lawyers in Texas, but there's very few.
But you've
And
been
I
there
can count
30
on
years?
one hand. There's only like 2 or 3 in Harris County who do regularly take cases, and we're a population of 4.7 million.
Wow.
Wow.
In the surrounding counties, you can almost get up to 10 million.
Wow. Okay, we got our work prepared. We've got to prepare ourselves for the work to be done. Thank you. for the
Thank you very much.
information.
Y'all have a good evening.
Take
All
care.
right.
Thank you.
And again, at the Gilchrist Experience, I've got my old crew back, and you look for more information from the old folks
And Junior.
and our juniors who bring us some of these stories. All right?
May I add that I've been feeling, and I've expressed this before, that the parents who watch the Gilchrist Experience should consider very carefully having their children enrolled or becoming members of National Action Network.
Oh, okay.
And that's going to bring maybe a little bit more caution to some of us and be a preventive. I think that works.
Well, see what we can do with Crump being in there, so that brings automatically Nan into it. So, Julian, I thought I had inside play here, and the mother was coming on,
it's not.
and that would have been something to hear from
With
her.
these situations with mothers losing their children, sometimes things happen, and there's a lot of pain that's involved.
Mm-hmm.
And she wasn't able to come here today, but we
Well,
still
she was
love her, and we still care about her, and we're here for her.
Okay,
Yes,
100%.
absolutely.
maybe next time we can get the mother on.
Maybe next time.
All right. The
Thank
God
you.
in me loves the God in you. Stay tuned for more of the Gilchrist Experience. Is that a wrap?
It's a wrap.
You looking over there, and the camera is looking at you looking over there. It's a
I think they cut us off anyway.
yeah, she said she got to go home.
How did you hear about the?
It's almost 7 o'clock.
Man, I was doing I was doing some research about like
She wants you to close it again.
I was doing
Close
some
it again?
research,
The God in me
What?
loves
just
the God in me.
general corruption.
The God in me
I
loves the
saw
God.
this
Oh.
story, and I just started to
Wait, hold on, hold-
investigate
Well, Gilchrist experience, say,
The God in me loves the God in you. Stay tuned for more of the Gilchrist experience. Thank you for coming. Power to the people.